All right, everybody, welcome to the year-end edition of Elevate Your Grind, brought to you by the Cannabis Lab. I'm your host, Todd Rosales, and that has not changed all year. Today is the last day of the year, and this is going to be our last episode of the year. I'm very excited for today's episode. We're going to do something a little different today. We're not going to go and interview a guest like we typically do. We're going to essentially interview the year 2020. No, we wouldn't do that. 2020 was a little bit mean. I don't know how it would react, but we're going to review the year. With me today, I have two very special guests. Both of them are alumni of the podcast, two of my favorite conversations all year. It's been a while since we checked in with them, but there's no better people to help us end the year 2020 than with the brother and sister team who are with me today that probably gave away who they are. Listen, folks, I've had an absolute blast doing this all year. We've done over 100 episodes, and I'm very excited to continue doing this well into next year. So with that being said, let's take a look back at the cannabis industry in 2020 with my guest today, the managing partners of Poseidon Partners. I think it's managing partners. I'll have you guys correct me. Brother and sister team, my favorite one, Emily and Morgan Paxhia. Emily and Morgan, welcome into the show. Thank you for coming back and ending the year with me.
Thank you for having us, and congrats on 100 episodes. It's a busy year.
Awesome. Well, you guys, like I said, you both have been on the show. I had an absolute blast. Let's see, we're trying to get fancy here, so we're going to change the screens around. Everything else is going to be a very special episode. This is the first time I'm dressing up ever. I typically wear a t-shirt on the show, but two of my favorite conversations with you both, talking about, I think we checked in with each other about halfway through the year, July and August respectively. So we had kind of a midway point of what you all saw in this industry. So I think it's only fair we bring you back in and let's see what happens. So this year, crazy on so many fronts. Never would have thought a global pandemic would actually be a good thing for our industry. Obviously the pandemic itself is horrible, but the one thing that happened is our industry was deemed essential. And it's crazy to me in a year that started off with the major headlines being MedMen can't pay their bills and they're paying in stock. 3 months later, the world shuts down and our industry was deemed essential. Looking back, I think we all agree that designation for being deemed essential clearly helped our industry. So I'd love to get your take on one of the first major events of 2020 back in, I want to say, mid-March.
Yep. Morgan, do you want to start or shall I?
Sure, no, I'm happy to kick it off. Yeah, I mean, for us, it's amazing. We were planning in, January and February with portfolio companies about the pandemic. I guess naively not thinking it was necessarily going to be such a big domestic problem, but because we were seeing the supply chain disruptions for companies that were doing business with China. And so, we were trying to come up with alternative supply chain to help manage through that period. So we had been actively thinking and trying to strategize around it. And then obviously it came here with a vengeance. Likely it was here well before we were recognizing it as being here. So we just finally started to catch up with it. But, I remember those early days in March when it felt like there was just no bottom in sight. Felt like we were getting very close to zero, and I think we are extremely lucky as an industry that we were deemed essential. I think we're extremely lucky because we did have the ability to stay open for the most part relative to others that haven't. And it's been just, horrible for them. But going back to, I'm just picturing the headset data right now of what it looked like when we went from seeming like things were going to be closed and the panic buying that happened and what that did to supply and demand. We were all out of control and even manufacturing domestically was all disrupted because people were starting to implement COVID. So, it threw a lot of friction in the system. So I remember that time, and just the uncertainty was just so extreme. But it was also a final stage for our industry, that kind of final clearing point that we had been going through from a bottoming phase for, call it, 18 months or so heading into that, where it was like that final correction where, good companies were quick to move back into growth mode and thriving. And so it was just a clear separation point, I'd say was how the end of Q1 was for cannabis.
So Emily, to transfer this over to you, you guys have investments in all across the supply chain. when the pandemic hit and things were shutting down, obviously Morgan had just addressed the panic buying. What were your thoughts, with the industry and your portfolio companies as well?
Yeah, I mean, initially we were very concerned because being shut down is the last thing this industry could afford to manage. But instead, what we saw is in staying open was the opportunity to really solidify cannabis's position as a positive contributor to society in every way possible. Not only one of the things we've always loved about investing in cannabis is that it's about job creation, it's about generating tax revenues that can go to positive programs in each of these states. And I mean, we even saw it in Illinois that I think it was like 300 government jobs were saved by cannabis tax revenues during this downturn or during this K-shaped recovery from a pandemic, which I think that everybody needs to, take very seriously about what's happening in this country because it's getting really separated. But one of the things that we're really excited about is that it did accelerate some of the progress in our industry from a business standpoint. So we had been largely brick and mortar businesses. This also accelerated the e-commerce experience around shopping for cannabis, and that's changed the way some of the brands and retailers manage through this. And so, for example, like one of our companies, Spark here in California, was already ahead of that because they had broader retail experience before applying it to cannabis. They knew the importance of having a really user-friendly website, and so they've already jumped on that, and their web shopping experience has been tremendous, and they pivoted right to that pickup and delivery focused approach. And then furthermore, they even got digital payments on the platform. So now people don't have to be managing with cash during a pandemic. They can use ACH. And that's a really important shift in the way that we're doing business. And so brands have to think about how to communicate with the consumers in that platform, and retailers do as well in order to make it easy and accessible. And so we've seen that across the board, like Ascend Wellness Holdings did that too right away in their markets. And so where it's acceptable, and we saw markets opening up for curbside pickup and delivery where they were being reticent to that before this. So we're moving more to a traditional retail model where you have your brick and mortar so people can encounter and engage with brands and retailers, but then you also have that digital platform so you can access the things that you're really looking for on a regular basis. And one more thing that I think that Morgan was hitting on, we're a very data-driven organization. And I think that we've really been tracking the trends about product categories and how they are being sold and what's really resonating in this time and what seems to kind of ebb and flow depending on the way that the economy is tracking. And so as Morgan mentioned, we saw the spending with the stimulus checks back in, what was that, June? And we've got stimulus checks on the horizon again, and it'll be interesting to see what's accelerating or decelerating. But we are cautioning companies to contemplate lower price point products so that people can continue to access cannabis in the legal market. Because don't forget, one of the reasons that the illicit market remains so strong is that they're not paying taxes, they're not paying to be an incorporated business, and so that they can undercut the regulated market. So we have to, as an industry, be able to kind of reach down and be able to supply product for people who are more price sensitive.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's interesting down here in Florida. I mean, I don't know what the prices are in California right now, but we're paying $50, $60 an eighth here, at retail, and that's medical with no tax. I don't know what the prices are out in California or Colorado, but it's funny when I talk to my friends about prices, like, oh, that's what I paid in high school, or that's what I paid way back in the day, and this is it, and the prices have come down. So it's really interesting to hear or to see how the legal market is going to combat the illicit market that way, because they're, I don't want to say they're cash starved, but they need the money to help scale and grow, as well as they need to lower their price point to sell more product, right? So it's going to be interesting to see the trend of pricing, or at least I see a lot of companies coming out with tiered levels of their offering, kind of like alcohol does, going forward, to be able to get a larger market share. Both of you have insider information as we're looking forward to 2021. When I say insider information, I mean you're talking to companies every day, not like we're giving out fake. I don't need to get you guys in trouble from an investment
Thank you for
standpoint.
clarifying. Yeah.
Yes, when I say you're insiders in the way that you're constantly looking at the data and everything else, that is publicly available to everybody. So, but on that note, are we going to be seeing more companies? And I bring them up because I just spoke to them, like Candescent. that are coming up with their top shelf, middle shelf, and then they say entry level because nobody likes the term low shelf. Are we going to see a lot of that going into 2021 for companies to capture more market share?
I mean, to just continue on that train. I mean, we would be ridiculous not to. One of the things this industry has to do is draw analogs from other industries. You just said it. Alcohol does it. Consumer packaged goods does it. You want to be able to have an offering at each level of desired spending, and I think it's the only way to do business. And I think if you're a branded product company, you really have to think about staying true to the core tenets of your brand so that you're not moving off brand. But I think there are ways to do that so that you can still address kind of each of those tiers of spending desirability. I don't know, Morgan, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, with this move to modernization of cannabis, right? I mean, there were so many people that were kind of in this cannabis curious category, right? Where they enjoyed going to stores, they enjoyed talking to bud tenders, and they kind of lost that and they had to become educated. So it became like a more normalized retail experience for them anyway. So to have more normalized offerings, is just a smart approach to, to your consumer base, and understanding what the consumers are looking for is very smart. And as Emily mentioned, being data driven to support that and thinking about your price points, trying to think about where things are, what's the segmentation, what are the buying behaviors. That data is becoming more and more present. So to address those markets and see where the demand is just, I think it's just a good part of the industry's progression in the right direction. And instead of just kind of like guessing and saying like, oh, I'm a buyer and I think these products are neat, got to be a little more educated about how you're retailing and what your price points are, to address your customers. And every store is, and it's still like retail or real estate rather, and that location matters, right? And those specific locations and the demographics, depend on those price points as well. And so I just think the industry has responded, or many have responded well in that, in thinking about it. So not only the retailers, but also the product manufacturers.
Yeah. I do want to just point out one thing, which is that I don't think Morgan or I would suggest that you get into a pricing war with your competition at really any level, because then you're just that's a race to the bottom. I think it's wise to run, savvy promotions and run your brand like you would in any other sector. But a lot of people have talked, it's going to be about brands, it's going to be about brands. But brand building is an incredibly challenging endeavor, and it's something that takes time, and you really have to figure out how to engage with your target consumers. And so, but that's where you develop a moat around price sensitivity, is having something more that's slightly intangible that the consumer can engage with. So if you're about quality, if you're about consistency, then you have to kind of hold to that and help to lead the consumer to understand why paying a little bit more for this product is worth it. And I think as an industry, we have to continue to do that so we can. It's almost like the industry needs a Got Milk campaign. I've been saying this for years, but we need to convey why people should shop in the legal market and not continue to support the illicit market.
I think that's one of the truest statements ever spoken on this show, and I'm 100% behind it. On that note, from what I gather, and I don't pay for my data, I find it freely on the internet, unfortunately. But I saw that the legal market's going to reach almost $20 billion this year, and it's actually supporting 243,700 full-time jobs. Funny enough, it's actually the largest source of new jobs in the country, and cannabis employees, on average, make a salary or a wage 10.7% higher than the median national salary. So I'm very proud of our industry. I am curious to know, though, a lot of things changed when we became deemed essential. Morgan, you touched on them, and Emily, you touched on them earlier, that e-commerce was sped up. Delivery was allowed in places where it wasn't allowed. And we essentially gave people easier access to cannabis because of the global pandemic. We even took cash out of the equation, as you both said. Would we still be, I know we do very well this year, but would we still be where we are if these things weren't implemented because of the pandemic? If it was truly still, you've got to stop at the ATM, get your cash, and then go to the dispensary and make your purchase?
I think it accelerated trends. So as far as raw dollars go for generated in the industry, I mean, we'll never know. So just kind of guessing. I don't know if we would be much different. Um, or if anything, no, I think we would be lower because to Emily's point about the illicit market, I do think we were able to penetrate some crossover because, coming off of the vape hysteria, which was all driven by illicit market products, and then a lung-based epidemic, people were more conscious and choosing to buy legally. It was just stressed a bit until the stimulus money kicked in because consumer spending was highly questionable. So I do think it hopefully accelerates some trends. It's really hard to measure the illicit market. So to truly know that is
They're not big on sharing their data.
yeah. They don't like to pay taxes. They don't like to share data. I mean, it's kind of hard. It's hard.
That's why we got to get rid of them.
But yes, but I do think we are. It's just again, it's just kind of an anecdotal assumption. But I think it is a good trend to see. It is tough depending on what states you're talking about. Like California has a big fall harvest that just takes prices way down, and so that's really hard to compete, especially when the illicit market's just moving product. They're just clearing product. And so when you're going to undercut the legal market by 40-50% plus easily, that does stress the system. So but as the newer and newer consumers are coming around to form factors that are more approachable to them, they are choosing the legal market. So yeah, I think but the retailing thing, the e-commerce thing, those were really powerful trends that will drive more revenue, better cost structures, more informed operators about their customers, so they can do more tailored offerings to them. So it's just a sophistication came in that accelerated things that probably would have taken several more years.
Interesting. Emily, anything to add?
No, I feel like he got it.
Nice. So backing out, so we've been talking kind of about the retail cannabis market, right? Whether it's adult use or whether it's medical, but and I finally can admit, I think I stole this from you, Emily, when I talked about adult use being a small part, and then medical, and then wellness, and then eventually industrial hemp, right? And I think I took the hand motions from you. I had to go back and look at the episode, but there is more to the cannabis market. CBD was huge at the beginning of the pandemic or going into the pandemic. And now it seems almost commoditized, where CBD is in beverages, it's in pillows, it's in pajamas. I mean, obviously some of that is a little bit of bullshit, but there are legitimate CBD. The biggest podcast in the world, the Joe Rogan Experience, is sponsored by Killcliff, and Joe just came out with his own flavor, right? Any podcast you listen to, whether it's Erica Nardi's Token CEO, the Barstool guys, any of the comedians you like, there is a CBD company sponsoring them. On that note, CBD is legal. There's interstate commerce. There's international commerce up to a certain point. Is there still opportunity? I mean, I'm sure there is, but what are the opportunities in the CBD market? Are we going to see any more advancement out of there? Or is that kind of, I don't want to say reach maturity, but it's getting there where it's become kind of commoditized, and we're waiting to see the FDA or somebody else step in to either make it a supplement, a wellness product, or whatever it is. What would you say the status of CBD is at the end of 2020?
I mean, I think right now the consumers are thoroughly confused, and that's all thanks to our own industry and the fly by night CBD people who were just putting the label on product. I mean, I'll never forget when I was in a bodega in New York 2 summers ago, and there was just like random CBD products on the shelves for like $80 for a tincture, probably totally gross garbage. And Morgan and I never forget, we went to a cafe in Brooklyn and they had CBD shots for your coffee. And being from California, we couldn't be more spoiled by the quality of products we have here. And so we got a shot in the coffee, and we basically had to dump our coffee out because it was the grossest thing we'd ever. It was like a nasty, like peppermint oil slick, because I think they were trying to cover up the taste of CBD or of cannabis. But so, I mean, I think we are now going to have to go through a period of re-educating the consumer about what terpenes are, what cannabinoids are, and how these things work together. And I think there are going to be ways to do it. And I think that intelligent product manufacturers and brands will be able to do it. But I think we are going to have to cut through the noise that has been generated by this industry. And if I had a dollar for every time I heard somebody being like, yeah, I tried CBD, I didn't feel anything from it, probably because they got access to a crummy product, or even worse, at one point we were hearing people were getting headaches from it, which the only thing that could have been causing that was some impurity that was in the product in addition to CBD. I mean, real CBD just won't give you a headache for any reason like that. But so, I think we'll see. And I continue to think we're going to see kind of a bifurcation on that, where we're going to see pharmaceutical level, or to your point, nutraceutical level products, where they're really going to be able to talk about the sourcing, quality of the ingredients, and why they should have certain impacts in the body. And I think those product companies will find a path.
Morgan, your views?
Yeah. I mean, prices have bottomed. There's been a huge clearing out of, so much supply, so many low quality operators, but it is a commodity. I mean, we've always kind of viewed it as like vitamin C. It's kind of just an input when it's not in a true medical form. I think Emily's point about the pharmaceutical application is different, but from like a wellness perspective, that's most of the benefit from it, which is great. I mean, CBD is a very beneficial thing, and there's no doubt about it. But it's just really hard to hold brand value around it. But when we're talking about industrial hemp, I mean, there's so much more to talk about too. When you think about as we've talked about at the very end of the last one, one of our favorites in that category is Basscore, and taking hemp stalks and turning them into finished products for textiles. They can do like face masks, which are kind of important, for their benefits of it's antimicrobial in its own right. And so you'd be able, just very good benefits there. So it's really exciting stuff. They actually just had a piece covering them down in Alabama about this new company that's going to be officially launching in 21. So it's been a year of more inward focus. But anyway, so opening up industrial hemp in the United States is a very exciting longer term trend. And again, just to clarify, that's ex CBD in that perspective.
Mm-hmm.
So on that note, I didn't bring you two on the show to talk about industrial hemp for about 47 seconds. I'm excited to see what next year holds for industrial hemp. Are we going to see more mainstreaming of industrial hemp and hemp products? I see a lot of the hemp products out there seems to be kind of a hemp cotton blend, or if it's a plastic, like a hemp plastic blend, but they are starting to get more and more hemp based. Are we going to start seeing more pure hemp products? I know when you and I spoke, we talked about hemp jeans, right?
Yeah.
Are we going to see hemp clothing? The face masks are great. I remember, I want to say back in June, July, I was looking at face masks. I'm like, I don't want to spend $20 on a mask. How long am I going to use this for? Clearly now in December, they become a staple item of anyone's outfit. But I'm really interested to see. And my question I've been asking since January of last year, how long am I away from going to Starbucks and getting a nice hemp straw in my drink, because those paper ones are still disintegrating every time I have a venti iced coffee? So talk to us about what we're going to see with the future of industrial hemp this year. Is it going to start to become more mainstream?
It is. It's just building the entire value chain. So it's a different trajectory. And that's the difference, where with cannabis, you have a very large established consumer base ready to buy, and you have more crossing and newer consumers. Versus industrial hemp, we have to build the entire ecosystem, and it's a little bit of a field of dreams, where if you build it, they will come, believing that this is a superior product, or highly complementary if you're talking about cotton. And just the amount of biomass needed to truly address that market is massive, massive, massive. And so that's, from our perspective of just being careful there, getting genetics right, working with farmers. Basscore is doing a lot of work in this area, because it all matters in the quality of the end product. And so you have to be mindful of that. And because it's all outdoor grown, given the size of the acreage needed, you get one shot generally in the United States. You get one growth cycle a year. And so, we would just want to make sure that, working with farmers, we're not over indexing, I guess, to, what if it's low throughput quality, and so it's just, you got to build it right for it to work. And when you're talking about the textile industry, massive industry, so their needs are so significant. We just don't want to overpromise. There have been companies that have done innovation in hemp before, and they blew themselves up because of that. They got way too much ahead of themselves, and it came back to bite them. We're lucky enough with Basscore specifically that we have a board member that is a legend in the textile industry. So he's been super helpful in guiding the company around not making those same mistakes again. But we will start to see it in 2021. I'm super excited for all the work that has gone into it. So you will start to see some clothing. It will be blended initially because the same, as I was just mentioning, just from a supply perspective. But it's, the path is forming there. And there's just so much processing capacity needed, so much biomass creation needed. There's just an amazing amount of white space in the industrial hemp category to truly build a thriving ecosystem. And COVID has really stressed what existing industrial hemp markets and how they function, because there is a very large European and Chinese industrial hemp market, but trying to import has become very challenging. And the quality is really not there, and they're blasting with all kinds of chemicals. And so there is real opportunity to see a onshoring effect in that space. And textiles companies are seeing it too. They want to diversify their supply chains. And obviously, if you can source domestically at a comparable cost structure, they'll do that any day, given the how much easier it is to do business locally.
Interesting. On that note, being hemp can be, I'm assuming here, I might be wrong, but I'm assuming that hemp can be exported as well. Does the U.S. have a chance to be a world leader in hemp-based products? I mean, we have a very large agricultural base here that has been struggling for a very long time. That's nothing that nobody's aware of, right? If farmers start adopting this and the U.S. comes, we have the right processes and everything else, is this something that we can become a world leader in? I mean, there's going to be a recession at some point. I don't know how there isn't going to be. Is this something that's going to help us get through that, or can potentially help us get through that?
I mean, I can jump in on, I think so. I think, again, a lot of farmers were burned on cultivating hemp for CBD because they were promised that they would see X, amount, but we were tracking, as Morgan mentioned, we knew the commoditization was coming because we get a lot of inbound inquiries for capital raises, and we were kind of tracking based on all of that inbound outreach, if all of that cultivation would turn on, just exactly how many millions of square feet and acres of cannabis or of CBD hemp were going to be entering the market. And so we saw that coming, but it was very disappointing for farmers who were kind of promised that they would be seeing a certain price per pound of the product that they were putting out of their fields. So we have to help to guide farmers back to cultivating hemp for these purposes, for industrial purposes, because then they can get a better return on their crop, even if it's compared to cotton or wheat, anything, or soy. It stands to be a better opportunity for them. And then, yeah, it would be an incredible thing to not only revitalize aspects of our agriculture around this, but to revitalize aspects of our, what's it called? Like for textiles, our textile industries that have become so sleepy here in the US and frankly have just actually ceased to exist. But the other way we could think about this too is that it's a story of the Americas and North America and Latin America, because a lot of people are paying attention to the fact that cannabis is looking to be legalized in Mexico. And we are very excited about that because it would be the largest federally legal market in the world, and a great one from a manufacturing standpoint. And they also have a long heritage around cannabis and hemp as a part of plant medicine there, along with cacti and mushrooms and different things that are part of heritage healing there. But they also have a heritage textile industry. And so being able to engage with that as well, I think it would just be great not to have to rely on China. And to Morgan's point, there's greenwashing around the way that hemp is manufactured there, but then there's just the entire, ecological footprint of manufacturing there. It's the practices, but then it's also putting it on container ships and shipping it across the ocean, and the impacts that that has on it. So if we could shorten our footprint around industrial hemp, and as far as it participates in different things like plastics, carbon nanotechnologies, textile fibers for textiles, I think it would be great. And I'm really excited because I'm seeing real mainstream brands adopting interest in this, and really in doing so in a greenwashing way. And so like Mara Hoffman is like a high-end brand that I love and my friends love. And I know she's really focused on this. And I'm starting to see other high-end, more bespoke designers taking interest. So I think there could be a really interesting thing. We talk about it at Basscore in terms of traceability. We talk about it as seed to sown. And I think it could just elevate everything around what hemp really means.
Well, I'm certainly excited to see that market come about. I'm excited to be able to try the products, and I think every episode I've talked about my Starbucks straw being made out of hemp. So
Yeah,
the day that comes and we can stop, my entire city banned plastic straws, right? So we have these pain in the ass paper straws everywhere you go. Yes, I know it's a first world problem, but clearly hemp is an easy fix to this. So I'm
it
looking
is.
forward to that opportunity. You had mentioned legalization in Mexico. I had that for like 9 segments from now, but let's move it up, right? What exactly does that mean for the market here? Because Mexico is obviously a lot larger than Canada when it comes to population. It's going to be really, I mean, I hate saying this, a lot of the illicit cannabis comes from Mexican
Mhm.
cartels or through Mexico, not necessarily from Mexico. Is there going to be an impact on the United States and on our market, maybe even the California market, by Mexico legalizing? Is it going to be good for us, or is it going to be bad for us? Are we going to see people going across the border trying to go to the other states to get better deals or anything else like that? I'm just curious to how we're all excited for Mexico because it's a huge market. Is that going to accelerate legalization in the US? Is it going to cause problems? I'm really interested in what you think the impact of Mexico will have on our market.
Look, I know there's been a lot of articles out lately about if cannabis is legalized in Mexico, is this going to, shut down the cartels or disempower the cartels? I mean, the cartels are a far more sophisticated business organization than I feel like people understand, and I
Oh,
think
yeah.
everybody. Yeah. And I think people overlook the way that the cartels participate in almost every fashion of our lives, including avocados. And so if anyone's been tracking what's been going on with that, I mean, they're burning down parts of the jungle down there in order to cultivate avocados illegally, or they're doing what they usually do, which is exploit local farmers to cultivate for them. And then, they're undercutting the farmers and getting their cut on that. So all of our very expensive avocado toast up here in the US, especially us in California, has created a very real economic opportunity for the cartels. So they'll participate in any way they can. The people I know, we've spent a lot of time in Mexico, and I spent a lot of time in the Mexican Senate speaking with the politicians, understanding the way they view this. And I think intelligently, they've realized that it's not going to eliminate the cartels. So what they're trying to do is try to figure out how to create a safe infrastructure around legal medical cannabis, especially first, that can exist where the cartels are going to kind of stay in their lanes and do what they have to do, So I think that's the most realistic and appropriate way to consider it. So it's not about, and look, I've also been reading some comments online about, oh, how legalization doesn't do anything to disempower the cartels. It is, in fact, true that it has helped to take away from the illicit market. And James Cole, James Cole, right? The author of the Cole Memo, even talks about this. The stats are down. Now the cartels have pivoted to other product categories because, again, very savvy organization. So it's just something to know about. It's kind of like a known entity that you have to understand. As it pertains to the US with Mexico, I think what's most interesting is that Mexico has manufacturing at GMP standards for the pharma industry. And so a lot of those actors are looking to participate in medical cannabis on a global standpoint. So just like we saw out of Colombia, where cultivators like Clever Leaves and processors are thinking about participating in a global GMP medical cannabis program, I think that's where we'll see Mexico participating. And what this may look like to the US is, yes, it may look like our more pharma CBD products or our nutraceutical CBD products may be coming from Mexico. And that would be fine, because frankly, when you look at some of the cost structures of these US operators, they really can't afford to make any margin on these products because it's just too expensive. And frankly, the quality isn't there. So where we sit on this is that we feel like it's a great opportunity for Mexico to kind of re-empower itself on a product that the US has frankly used to stigmatize and kind of engender further racism against Mexican citizens, and for them to participate in this global economy that we see existing around cannabis. I mean, one of the things that happened, I mean, there were so many amazing political things that happened around cannabis in 2020 that I think we almost got like complacent. We were like, okay, yeah, like South Dakota, they just legalized, medical and adult use at once. Like, great. These things have been hard to come by in past years. And then all of a sudden the UN is like looking at a way of rescheduling cannabis on a global level. And the whole reason the UN schedules exist is thanks to the US. So that's our own doing. But the fact that this is shifting as rapidly as it is really a strong tailwind.
First of all, so that's like the next 9 topics we're going over, but it's interesting. It seems like you've done a little bit of research on the Mexican market already.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, you just spent a little time. Well, it's our job to stay in front of these trends. That's always been our job. We were early in Canada, early in the US, early in Latin America, early in Europe. I mean, but we just try to play to the market sizes that we think are most interesting.
So on that note, you had mentioned South Dakota, which legalized both medical and recreational at the same time, but on that ballot, and every state that had a ballot initiative for cannabis in this past election won. Is that going to be a trend that we're going to continue to see going forward? I mean, we had Arizona, Montana, New Jersey, South Dakota, all with adult use. You had Mississippi in there as well. Are we going to continue? Do we think we're just going to continue to see this perfect track record, or do you see certain states that it's just not going to happen? I mean, when I look, I'm here in the state of Florida. We're surrounded by Georgia and Alabama. I don't know if I see it happening in those states, maybe in Georgia, but you guys are familiar with Alabama a little bit. Are we going to continue to see state by state just continue to adopt either a medical program or an adult use program?
Nothing's a given in this industry, and complacency will kill our momentum real fast. So if we just assume things are just going to happen, that's when things stop happening, and could get worse. This is until federal laws are changed. It's not done, and how these programs are developed is also just as important. But it certainly has become a more political benefit to talk about legalization, right? I mean, right now there's a major Georgia runoff happening that everybody's following very closely, and cannabis has come into that discussion of, if I win, if I'm Senate, I will support legalization of cannabis. And so that is very different, right? Coming out of some more of these conservative areas. I mean, Texas is getting a lot of attention now. To your point, Alabama is talking about it, and these are conservative places. So it's becoming less about a conservative discussion, other than when you're talking about stimulus packages and how many times the word marijuana is used in a banking bill. They love to throw that argument around, but for the most part, they understand, especially now that COVID has just plowed a huge hole in these state balance sheets, massive. This is an area that helps, and they understand that. And trying to raise taxes right now is just doesn't make any sense. And we're seeing it in states like New York and California. And raising taxes is a terrible idea, and that's why people are flocking to Texas, flocking to Florida, just leaving because the burden is too much. I think that will rebalance, but regardless, generating new tax revenue and job creation is something that politicians will understand when their states are under stress. And so that's why, I think it is just becoming a broader conversation. But like I said, the work there's still plenty to be done. I mean, just right after South Dakota legalized or voted to legalize, then there was already, petitions to try to veto it and, fight it. And so that program could be a long time before it actually opens. I mean, that's the other thing too, is just because it's voted upon, the enactment, the regulations, the opening. Look at how long it took for Massachusetts. I mean, that's, been a trickle, and it's finally getting its legs going. So, but from our perspective, we want to see the end of the destruction it's continuing to cause on families around the country, because we are still disproportionately targeting people in this country, which is horrible. So we want to see decrim happening, and see continued progress at a state by state level, because we're still learning how to regulate this in an effective way. California is a great example. It's a country in its own right, and trying to get this sorted out here has proved to be quite challenging. As a result, to our earlier points, that's what's helped the illicit market stay in the game, is that the access hasn't been there still. There's so many municipalities across California that don't have legal access. So, and I do understand trying to, have a rollout that is contained, but in these legacy markets, it does present that wedge between legal and illicit.
Absolutely. All right. So we're getting towards the end of the show here. So I want to make sure that we hit on a couple topics here. 2020 was supposed to be a big year for M&A in the industry. And I'm not sure that it lived up to that name, although we've seen a lot of announcements come in the past month or so, right? One of the big acquisitions this year was Curaleaf acquiring Grassroots to become one of the biggest companies around the country, or in the world, actually. Just recently, we're seeing, Verano and AltMed announce an agreement. We've seen Columbia Care and Greenleaf, AYR and Liberty Health, Afria and Tilray. It's really interesting. Are we going to continue, considering a lot of these announcements came at the end of the year, these transactions aren't final, are we going to see what we expected to see in 2020 in 2021? Are we going to start to see acquisitions to form a lot of these new MSOs just coming along the path? Or is that what you guys see for 2021? Or are there going to be local companies coming up out of nowhere? Really interested to get your opinion on that.
I mean, I would say I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I do think we'll see quite a bit of M&A, some very strategic and opportunistic and accretive, and some, frankly, as bailouts, kind of like the Afria Tilray. I just feel like there's ways you can see these companies coming together where that old 1 + 1 = 3. And I think we'll see a lot of it in California, because California, frankly, is still an unbelievably challenging market, and great operators sometimes need to just deepen in their vertical access to improve the way that they function in this market. So, I think we're going to see quite a bit of it. And in fact, we know of quite a few things that will be announced early in the quarter and early in 2021 in general. So I think that will be a busy time for sure. But I do think we will continue to see new operators start to pop up or emerge. It's just the nature of any business, is that where people make things look interesting, competition follows. And we've already seen it in the tech aspect of cannabis, but we'll certainly see it in the operator aspect of cannabis. And I think that some of the MSOs have been very fortunate in doing what they've done, because they have access to these limited license markets. They've had access to capital via being in the capital markets and the public markets. But I think that everyone's going to have to step up their game if they want to stay in that top 5. Because I think other operators are coming, and other operators are looking at what they did and are learning quickly, and are maybe being more efficient with capital. So it's great. Competition is what we need. And I think that this industry is up for it. And I think it's going to make it just better. So.
Awesome. Morgan, anything you want to add, or did Emily cover it?
The only thing I was going to say, it's interesting talking about timelines, because in some instances we pulled forward time a lot, right? And what that meant was a lot of fundamental improvement. I kind of call this like the inward year, where a lot of companies were inward facing, getting their house in order, because they didn't really have much of a choice. You couldn't travel, access to capital was super tight, so you had to work on your business. And so the fundamental improvements just sets the stage for a lot of these kind of, so next year could be a really pretty exciting year for activity. Consolidation, M&A, new companies going public, because that, the arbitrage spread is only getting more severe with the public comps relative to private comps. Money still has not really gone into privates. So valuations are still very, very low. That spread's very wide. And so that's very attractive if you're a public company and you have that positive arbitrage, you have a very high price, or not very high price, but just a higher price than the privates by a good amount, then, and you see areas in your business that are, there's a hole, whether it's a market that you would like to get into, like Arizona or California. But to Emily's point, that competition is coming for these bigger groups. And that's an exciting thing, that testing their ability to operate, ability to compete. California is the most cutthroat industry in the country by far. And so if you can compete and do well in California, I think that, you really understand competition. And that's something that the larger east of the Mississippi folks will start to feel of what real competition means, and not make the mistakes of, as Emily mentioned before, race to the bottom price kind of games, like winning by delivering really good products and working well with your customers and understanding what your customers want. So I'm excited for 21. I think it's, we're going to see a lot of really interesting things happen. There will be some, things that'll be ridiculous. Obviously, there always is. But, focusing on the good quality stuff, I think it's going to be really interesting and exciting.
Very cool. So we talked about 2020 and what that looked like. Let's start looking at what 2021 is going to look like. The first thing I'd like to do is, I got this article from the Motley Fool. Let's talk about the top 10 cannabis markets in the country. And I would love, you don't have to comment on each one, but any market you think is either going to be way higher on the list next year or lower, or if you think it's going to be about the same. So according to the Motley Fool, we've got California in at $3.8 billion as number one. Colorado at 1.7 at number 2, Michigan just edging out Florida at number 3 at 1.21 billion, Florida at 1.2, Washington at 1.1 billion, Nevada at 960 million, Oregon at 831 million, Arizona at 804 million, Massachusetts at 682, and at number 10, Illinois with 543 million. So on that list, can we expect to see the same kind of rankings next year, or do you see any of these newer markets jumping up the chart?
I think there will be a lot of rebalancing. I think California stays number one until Florida legalizes outright. Then there could be some competition of who's number one, but I think California owns that for a while. But then amongst the ranks, I think Illinois is going to be twice as big next year, at least. New Jersey is going to pop in there. Arizona is going to get bigger. I don't know if it's going to be quite a double, but it'll be a $1 billion+ market next year for sure. So I see them moving up the ranks. I see Oregon largely staying the same relative size. Same thing with Washington. So I think there's going to be certainly some rebalance in there. I think Massachusetts will get bigger. I think that, it's finally starting to see some opening, and, post-COVID vaccinations and cities starting to rebound. I think that could be a sleeper surprise.
Yeah, I would put Massachusetts as a state to watch for next year, despite the governor's attempts to shut it down this year. And he did succeed on that for a little bit on the adult use side, but I'm very excited about what I see coming in Massachusetts. And then I'm very excited about New Jersey and what that means for other states like New York and Connecticut to enter the scene, in Rhode Island, frankly. But one of the things I wanted to call out is that you just listed, when you listed that Colorado was in the top, they were number 2?
Number 2, yeah. 1.7 billion, 1.4 recreational, 0.3 billion in medical, if this is accurate.
Right. Well, yeah. And so in tracking our headset data this year, one of the things that's been most exciting, and if you go onto their blog, you can see there's updates every month about what's happening in each of the states and growth and category growth. It's really incredible information to be tracking throughout this whole very dynamic time in our industry. But Colorado has been legal since January 2014, when we also opened our firm to outside capital. And the growth of that market is still, I believe, at above 20% year over year. And so anyone who thinks that it's all just about opening new states in order to drive growth is actually wrong, because what we're seeing is that these legacy markets are still driving incredible growth. And that's not something to ignore because of everything that it represents. And so I would just argue that after that market being open for that long, continuing to see that strength of growth, and yes, they've gone through consolidation, they've gone through some periods of challenges in their wholesale market, but it's very emboldening for me to see what happens in markets like that.
That's a great point that they did that growth even with a major drop in tourism. I mean, they missed.
Yeah.
so much of their
Yeah.
ski season, and those are, huge drivers. And so, yeah, that was good, just good, solid local growth. And Nevada's the same
Organic.
thing. The fact that Nevada did that without any casino traffic, right? I mean, we would all be in Vegas, there would have been 30, 40,000 of us there this year. None of us were there. And that's just one event.
And apparently a bunch of us doing karaoke after the main party. Sorry.
Don't even get me started.
Morgan had to remind me that I don't get to take a ski trip this year, so I had to call out your karaoke.
We can't have nice things.
Yeah.
Last thing before I let you both go, 3 things from each of you. Your favorite thing that happened in 2020 in the industry, what you're looking forward to in 2021, and then because it's an internet show, we have to do this, a bold prediction for 2021 about the industry, right? So, and then of course we'll do this again next year and we'll see how you guys did. So either of you can start off, but 3 things from each of you.
I'll start. I was really excited that New Jersey voted so unanimously or so well to get an adult use market open. So I'm really excited about that. I just feel like that's a great indicator of things to come. And I'm excited for kind of the creative minds on the East Coast to start participating in brand building and product building on this. So that's something that I will continue to be excited about. Can't wait to see that market open. The second thing, what was the second thing? It was
what you're looking forward to in 2021 and then the bold prediction.
That's right.
Yeah, so last year we started the year coming on the final kind of push of a bear market. And it had been tough. Like that was one of the reasons that 2020 was difficult in the beginning for us, is that cannabis had been in a bear market for 25 months, as Morgan points out. And so it felt like we were really on a downtrend for a really long time. And so it felt like we started the new year and it was kind of a tough thing to get the momentum up. And then, we slammed into COVID, blah, blah, blah. So I'm excited that we're starting this year quite in another direction, which is we have a strong tailwind. And so I just think the thing that I'm going to watch for is that for everybody to be really smart this time and not make the same mistakes of the last time we saw the momentum and really focus on execution. So I'm excited about that for 2021. I think it's going to be the story of momentum and execution. And then for my prediction, I wonder what Morgan's going to say, but I predict we get banking regulation in 2021. And I think that it's going to be an enormous signal to institutional capital and to the exchanges. And that I think the whole face of this industry is going to change because capital will be flowing into it. And again, I hope everybody's ready for it. And I'm excited about that.
So my favorite thing of 2020, I think it's a really good idea to call out the positives because it's certainly easy to get very negative. So positive, my favorite of 2020 was our industry staying nimble. The response and shift so rapidly, especially the good companies, in responding and moving forward. They weren't paralyzed. They did everything they needed to do across the entire vertical to respond and perform and thrive. So that was, I thought, was a favorite thing. I mean, like look at California. We had forest fires, we had looting, we had all kinds of horrible things happening, and the good ones just kept navigating and working and moving forward. And so that's really a highlight of 2020. 2021. I think prediction-wise, I've been kind of toying around with this concept of Bitcoin as a leading indicator of cannabis. And I know it's kind of weird saying that right now with Bitcoin at like 27,000, 28,000, everyone's back to saying it's a bubble, it's unsustainable, it's not institutionalized, all this stuff. But there was real institutional money that flowed in. And to see that happening there, I feel like we are the next step for institutional capital to flow. And that will be a material change that is hard to understand until it actually happens. And I think there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be pleasantly surprised with what that means. The speed, the size is significant. My bold prediction for 21 is longtime portfolio fan of ours, GTI ringing the NASDAQ bell.
Ooh, I like that one.
but they'll be the first ones to ring the bell as a U.S. multi-state operator. And I have no idea. Ben, Anthony, Andy, no one said anything about that. It's just a prediction. So just want to clarify that.
Do you think NASDAQ or NYSE?
NASDAQ.
Okay.
All right. I like the prediction. It's very interesting. We're gonna write these down and hopefully they'll come through. Thank you both so much for joining us for 2020 in review. Of course, it is New Year's Eve, folks. So we're gonna celebrate a little bit here. I want to propose a toast.
Whoa,
The crap out of me, and
woo!
I knew I was opening it. So unfortunately, I can't virtually Zoom you guys any champagne yet. I know this is a cannabis show. I'm inside. I can't light up inside. So we're going to go with champagne. I want to thank you guys both for being my guests this year, and a toast to everybody else out here in the cannabis industry. Keep doing what you're doing. Looking forward to seeing what you do in 2021. And then on a personal note, January 28th of 2020, we did our first episode of Elevate Your Grind. I sat down with Robert Friedman and Charles Felix, and we did our first episode. And going into the pandemic, we had about 7 or 8. After that, we put our foot on the gas. We're ending the year with like 105, 106 episodes. I'm not sure. It has been one hell of a ride. I want to thank a lot of people who have helped me get here. Morgan and Emily, both of you guys doing the show, helped kind of legitimize us, being one of the biggest funds in the industry. Thank you both for being guests. I want to thank Brady Cobb, who was one of our first major guests on the show, Rosie Matteo and her team at Matteo Communications. Hell of a job. I mean, the amount of people that you put on this show is absolutely incredible. Amount of great guests, again, helping legitimize us. Cynthia Salarizeta, again, the people that you connected me with, absolutely incredible. Evan Bopp and Robert Friedman. Evan edits every single one of these shows, has them on time, puts up with me. He's incredible. Robert, without C-Lab, we wouldn't be here. You've given me a platform to promote some of my favorite people in the industry. And then Charles Felix, for those of you who don't know, episode number 1, we used all of Charles' equipment. He came with his van, set everything up for us, allowed us to only sit down and talk to the camera, and inspired me to keep going. So I want to thank everybody for helping us through 2020. We're looking forward to have everybody in 2021. And here's cheers, everybody, to the cannabis industry. Thank you both so much. And we will see everybody next year. Bye, everyone.